Really? Is that? But it's a good hire.
What? How did Kevin do that?
Look at our urbanized boundary to see. I think we looked at it the other day, and if I remember right, I think we are. Well, no, it's not, because our eastern boundary, goes all the way up to Ellicott Highway, and the urbanized boundary does not. We're short 5 or 10 miles or something. I don't think we've ever had a project out there, so.
You'll like him. I like him.
So I'd never thought about it. All right. Well, everybody's looking for money for I-25. Questions want to come up. It's like from our board level, we want to spend money.
Right. So yeah, I mean, he's great. He's learning a lot. He's already blowing me away. I'm like,
well,
my job.
Yeah, there are portions.
Everybody said I couldn't stay.
Congratulations.
You never told me.
Yeah, I said you last month.
I can't remember yesterday. It wouldn't be last month.
So Mark Andrew is going to introduce the new guy.
Okay.
Because he's supposed to have been here by now, so I could do that before I left, and he's not. He's stuck in traffic on the
Local
I-25.
agency being what you?
No, we don't
was,
believe
and they were
it's
freaky
Indiana
fast.
now, so these folks will have to contact him to get their contract started.
Oh, okay.
It's a good Jimmy John's day.
Not anybody that I should have been dealing with.
Not yet. No.
All right.
Yeah. Is there one? Is there one in Monument? Yeah.
And if I see or I hear anything else before I leave today, I'll send you an email.
So it's east of
Thank you.
east of I-25 and north of 105. So is it by the school?
Everybody's looking for money for I-25.
Yeah. I just thought I didn't get it.
What?
Oh, three amigos or three. That's amigos. I think I know which one you're talking about.
Everybody donate a little bit.
So I'll see you.
Sacrifice. So they're looking at.
Trying to be healthy today, and they're the only ones that will make like a
Kevin told me
like a bunless, breadless sandwich where they just wrap it in lettuce.
Really?
Yeah. It's,
There's just a couple
yeah.
extra.
If you do, it's called an unwich, and it's just like a lettuce wrap. But you get them, and they make it really good. I gotta stay out of the carbs for a little while.
They're going to be project, unfortunately. Some are already in motion.
Hello.
Then do they need to be? You shouldn't smile too much again. When money falls out.
You did good.
Well, anyway.
You did good.
Listed, even if it's we're not going to do something.
You know, we weren't prepared to talk about this today because we haven't, allowed the new city council to even be sworn in. So what's driving this is House Bill
How's it going?
1242, and that's only
Planning Commission bill all right?
Tier 1.
Good.
So we can limit the discussion to that if you want to take that approach, and then we can. Yeah, just because I think everything that Jennifer wanted is on that Tier 1 list. So that, basically stuff. They moved over.
Oh, good.
Just Brown knows the boss.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the April 20th Transportation and Advisory Committee meeting. We have a quorum, and let's start with introductions.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County.
I'm Joe Wyke. I'm Rick Orphan's boss, and he couldn't be here today. So,
Thanks for coming.
Aaron Horsemeyer, Schriever Air Force Base. Mike Kozak, Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station.
Randy Williams, City of Fountain.
Ken Prather, PPACG.
Aaron Busto, Federal Highway Administration.
Larry Manning, Town of Monument.
Tim Roberts, City of Colorado Springs.
Robert Osvich, Town of Palmer Lake.
Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit. In the audience, please.
Mark Andrew, CDOT.
Kathleen Krager, City of Colorado Springs.
Jim Moore, Community Advisory Committee.
Staff.
Kevin Reyes, PPACG.
Jennifer Valentine, PPACG staff. Bethany Schumer, PPACG.
All right, thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, or are there any changes anybody would wish to make?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
So that's Bob with the motion and Jennifer with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 3, are there any public comments for items that are not on the agenda?
I hope this is not a surprise to you. Jim Moore, Chair of the Community Advisory Committee. As we've been going through a couple of things on our roles and responsibilities, one question that has come up that really probably is more in your bailiwick, but we would like to ask about it, and in light of the conversation that we just had upstairs, I think it's appropriate in this conversation to continue, and that is what is the driving need for TIP amendments to be submitted monthly? Can it be done quarterly? It's my understanding from some folks who've done some research that some of the other MPOs do it on a quarterly basis. They just consolidate them, do a good combined presentation and so forth. So we would ask you to just consider that. Perhaps it's a staff issue to do some background on what would it be involved in doing that and whether that would impact timeliness with some of the projects. I'm not aware, as we've done these, that many of these came in as emergencies or changes of that sort. Now, this is different from the administrative amendment, which is pretty straightforward and we have incorporated into our consent agenda. So I would be happy to try to address questions, but it's just something that has bubbled up as we've talked about it and looked at our agenda. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'll give one little response. I mean, I think there are a lot of items that are just opportunistic, or they have to happen. We need to keep projects moving. We need to have them rolled forward, and some of those are administrative amendments, and they can be done immediately. But the TIP amendments come in, very, very random, and there's really times where those can't wait for, a quarterly meeting. I mean, I think all of us have had examples where we've needed something amended quickly, and sometimes, I mean, it's really a 2-month process because it goes through all of the committees 1 month, and then the board approves them the next month. So it's even that sometimes can be lengthy to some of the locals. But going to a quarterly process, I think, would be very difficult for a lot of us.
Okay. No, I just thought I'd bring that forward.
Sure.
Is it a concern?
No.
I would just add that, I mean, part of what our responsibility, through FHWA and CDOT is to advance the money and get the projects out on the ground as quickly as possible. And I think that would definitely hinder that. I think, we only do TIP amendments when we have to, and because they're a process for everybody. But I guess I would put it on the reverse and say, why wouldn't we do a TIP amendment at the earliest possible, that we identified a need for one so that we get those projects out on the ground. So that's just one
Okay.
perspective.
Mine was kind of along the same lines. Is there a concern, or is it more of just a question?
It was more of a question as we look to try to what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a plan for how we best apply our time in our meetings, just as you all are interested in doing. And so we are looking at how the TIP amendment process works and whether it could be done on a quarterly basis. I hear the concerns, and those have occurred to me, but I simply told my team that I'd be here today, and so that's all. That's really all that I had. I think.
Kevin.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question that you guys have as the CAC, and I've been at several of the meetings and understand the context of the question. Based off what Brian said, unfortunately, the reality is that some of these projects just have to go through the amendment process monthly to get started. But I think to bring back to the CAC for this month, we could consider TIP amendments, putting them on the consent agenda if that's something that the CAC wants to consider. If it's taking up a lot of time at the CAC meetings, that's something that we could talk about.
Well, as you know, it varies. You've been caught in the middle of those. It varies as to how much time we devote to it, but you all are the ones that really bring the technical knowledge to bear. So we wanted to bring the question forward. I think I've heard enough to take back to our team that is working on that and let them know that we'll just continue doing that as we have in the past. And I appreciate the time very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item number 4, approval of our regular March 16th minutes and the March 21st goals workshop minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review them? Could I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Of both?
Well, I only read one and I was only at one, but unless anyone objects, I'll move approval
Let's
of
do
both.
them separately. All right, so,
You want to just do one?
yes, for the
Okay,
March 16th
we'll start with the
minutes.
16th.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. How about a motion for the March 21st goals workshop meeting minutes?
I
Please.
was not there. I
I
have to
wasn't,
abstain.
yeah, I wasn't there either.
I wasn't there.
I wouldn't either.
I was, but I can't make a motion, correct?
Technically, no.
I think that one's going to have to be postponed to next month.
Okay. All right.
Who's out there?
Carry that over to next month if you
Florian,
want.
Elaine, Anton.
Move.
Mike was there,
Can we make a motion? We're not
your
voting.
non-voting member. Yeah.
I move we
Sorry.
table this to next month.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
I have a
Need a second?
question.
Is there a second? Yeah.
Can I ask, Brian, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there a reason why we want to do minutes for that particular? Did we even have a quorum at that? So, most of us weren't there. I'm trying to figure out why we're approving these minutes officially. Just if
Well, it
someone
was,
knows why.
That is a real good question. I don't think you have a quorum there.
No, we didn't.
We don't have to approve them, but we did want to include them just so there's not.
Just for information?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then maybe we don't need to table it.
Okay. Can we revise the agenda to have the March 21st minutes as information only?
Okay, they don't,
So moved for that one.
Okay.
Yes, we can do that.
I moved.
So let me retract my motion.
Oh,
Second agrees.
Okay.
so I move that we change that item number 4 on the March 21st meeting as an informational item.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. So Brandy and Tim motioned and approved the March 16th minutes, and then Jennifer and Tim did the information item for March 21st. Okay, thank you. All right, item number 5, approval of TAC membership appointment, El Paso County.
In the packet, you'll see my letter with some staff changes within the county. I would like to propose our primary voting members, which currently is myself and Victoria, to remain as Victoria, but to add my deputy county engineer as the primary voting member, and I would change to an alternate. And then the other person we had on there as an alternate has left the county, so we're adding one of our planners who's been very involved with PPACG in the last long-range plan update, Ramir Fitzpatrick, as our other alternate. So that's what I would propose, and I appreciate your favorable vote.
And I would like to correct my memo to say that the proposed motion should be to recommend the membership and not approve.
I'll recommend the approval.
Okay. All right. Could we have a motion to approve item 5, please?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Motion with Bob, second with Brandy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you stop in every now and then?
I will be here every now and then, but I can now watch them online.
And let me take this time to say thank you for all of your years of great leadership and
appreciate it.
so full of
It's
information.
been fun. I'm
and,
not completely off, but
No, I know. Yeah.
it's time for some other people to learn and take a role. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7A, action item for TIP Amendment 9 to the
How about
2017.
item 6?
Excuse me? Oh, yeah, sorry. Item 6, Board of Directors report. Ken.
The board approved the administrative change and tip amendment number 8, an information item on the long-range draft goals was presented to bring the board up to speed on what had been accomplished at the special meeting and the workshop, and we'll be discussing that more today.
Are there any questions for Ken? All right, thanks, Ken. Item 7A, TIP Amendment 9 to the 2017 to 2022 TIP.
Good afternoon, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner with PPACG. Today I'm going to be going over 2017-2022 Amendment number 9. Amendment number 9 just comes in one part. It's coming from AMBLICAB, and they are requesting to add faster dollars, a total of 112,000 faster dollars with a $28,000 local match into the TIP, and they plan to buy 2 body-on-chassis buses with those funds, and that is TIP Amendment number 9.
Are there any questions for Kevin? Do we have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second. All right. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Item 7B, Long-Range Transportation Plan Goals. Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Valentine, Transportation Planner with PPACG. I do have PowerPoint that I'm going to pull up here. It's because several of you have seen it many times. I'm going to move through it quickly, but please feel free to flag me down if you have a question. All of the materials are in your packet, and I do apologize. This is the reason for your very lengthy packet, but we did want you to see all of the work that we've done so far, all of the public comments we received, so hopefully maybe all of you didn't need to print it out. Okay, so I just quickly want to go over some of the results from the goals survey and workshop. Like I said, a number of you were able to attend the workshop and the special TAC meeting, but not everyone. Then the main objective of today is to present the draft goals that were formulated at the special TAC meeting and the vision, and hopefully get a motion on those. And I'll talk briefly about the next steps, just context. So survey was out for a month. We got almost 400 responses. You all saw the format. We had some open-ended questions, and we wanted to get input on the 2040 plan goals. So you've probably seen this graph before. We had a few of the themes kind of rise to the top: transit, non-motorized mobility. Then there were a handful of others that were pretty significant from those open-ended questions about the kinds of things that people want to see in our region over the next 25 years. We also asked about what people thought of the goals from our previous plan, the 2040 plan, and overwhelmingly people wanted to keep them, if not with high priority, with either high or low priority. So we want to keep all of these topics in mind, even if they don't move forward as actual goals. So 18 themes emerged from the survey, and we took those to the workshop that we held just a few days after the survey closed. So here are a few photos from the workshop. We had it in this room. I see a number of your faces in here. Thanks again for all those who were able to come. So this is the first exercise we did. It was we call it the red dot exercise, and you can see the results here. So all the participants were given 15 red sticky dots, and of the 18 themes, we said, go have fun with your dots. You can put all 15 on one. You can put one on each of 15, however you want to divide it up. So we just wanted to have another way of seeing what people's priorities were, a little different from the survey. So the second thing we did is what in these pictures, people came back and sat at their tables in small groups and talked about the 15 themes of the 18 that rose to the top. People wrote down word associations, pros and cons, whatever they thought of related to the theme on little Post-it cards, and gave them to us when I rang the bell after 5 minutes. So the last thing we did at the workshop was the green dot exercise. So after everyone had the benefit of all that great small group discussion, they had 5 green dots to go back around to the boards that were on the wall and prioritize again. And a lot of the same things still rose to the top, but when it came down to it and people really had to choose, there were a few differences. So then in the end, we wanted to get people's sort of summary remarks, their takeaways. A big thing we heard from several of the tables was that some of the goals could really be combined. There was a lot of overlap. Maybe things shouldn't be a goal if it's already a federal requirement, so maybe we should look at other ways to incorporate those instead of in our high-level goals. Some people said having too many goals could make the plan lose focus. And then there were a few suggestions to look at other examples, like what CDOT has done and a couple of our neighboring MPOs. So again, in general, there was support for fewer goals that were more visionary and then have associated targets and objectives to address some of our other requirements. So we had the special TAC meeting on March 21st. Our real objective here was to develop a structure. So if we want to start combining goals, how's that going to look? What are our objectives and our targets and our performance measures going to look like under that structure? So we decided to bring how we structured everything in the 2040 plan and also bring some of those other examples we heard people wanted to see, like from CDOT or North Front Range MPO or DRCOG. And then we wanted to remember that we need to address those federal requirements somewhere in our plan. So this is the structure from the 2040 plan. On the left, this column is just the goal. So there's a second page that goes with this. So in the last plan, we had 13 goals, and you could follow the goals straight across the table for objectives, targets, and all the way over to scoring criteria. So nobody liked this format, so we talked about doing it differently. So the example we brought was from North Front Range. And up here is their vision, or what they call their value statement. Then they have 4 high-level, very broad visionary goals. And then the structure, as you can see, branches out into more specific objectives, performance measures, and targets. I'm going to skip over these unless anyone has a specific question about the national goals and planning emphasis areas. And again, this is just to show you the structure. You don't need to be able to read all of it. But so we started coming up with our own similar structure. So at the top, this is our vision. And I'll touch on it more in a minute. But basically at the special TAC workshop, there was some consensus that the vision from the 2040 plan still served as a pretty good umbrella for the new goals that we were coming up with. So as of right now, this vision up here is verbatim from the 2040 plan. Then we have our 5 goals that we came up with at the special TAC meeting. We wanted to show how those national goals and planning emphasis areas can be nested under our MPO goals. And then the last thing down here in these green boxes is the 18 themes that came out of the survey and the workshop. And really, we just wanted to make sure that there was a place for everything. Ultimately, the idea is to fill this in with our specific targets and objectives. This was just kind of a placeholder to make sure we didn't forget anything. Okay, so now down to the specifics. So this is the vision from the 2040 plan. So create a sustainable multimodal transportation system that meets regional mobility and accessibility expectations as essential elements of the Pikes Peak area's quality of life. So we can come back to this in a minute if there are objections about clunky language or anything else. Brandy sent me an email. And then our 5 draft goals. So hopefully you've had a chance to read through them in your packet. I won't read them to you, but just the 5 topic areas are maintenance and operations, mobility, connectivity and accessibility, safety, and then economic vitality. And these were really a combination of, again, what we saw from CDOT had 4 goals that were very similar to these. North Front Range had 4 that were also very similar. There was some conversation about combining some of these, but ultimately we sort of liked the way these 5 broke out. Before I forget, I do want to mention that depending on what happens with the goals at this meeting and the CAC and the board, if those move through, the next thing we do want to start doing is coming up with those targets and objectives, and we do anticipate needing to have either another special TAC meeting or just planning to have a longer TAC meeting next month or in June, whenever it comes through. So before we end this item, I do want to have a conversation about which of those would be preferred. We had a good turnout at the last meeting, but we would like to have a quorum if we're going to have another special meeting. So that's all I have. I'd like to open it up for discussion about the vision and the goals, because that's what we're asking for today, is, if you're ready, is for a motion on those.
Yeah, I would just like to add, my thanks to the staff and for those who attended the workshop to develop the goals. It was a really good group. I mean, I think we went for a full 2 hours, and there was a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of good coming together and a lot of agreement that we don't want this next plan to have 13 goals, and that's been said repeatedly, that we thought that a lot could be combined and still meet the federal requirements and all those planning emphasis areas, but also do what we would like it to do and make the project applications that we have to fill out much easier for us, but also for staff to evaluate and score. So, we left that with a really good feeling, and we think that this is more in line with the way things are done in a lot of other areas, and we're really pretty happy with the process. Thank you.
Just to add thank you for listening and including that in the implementation. So we appreciate it.
So yeah, I'll say thank you. Great job. Wonderful. And then my 2 cents. So I read this and read this and read this, and I tried to reword it. At the end of the day, I really just cut it off after expectations to create a sustainable multimodal transportation system that meets regional mobility and accessibility expectations. Somehow, when I got to the as essential elements of the Pikes Peak area's quality of life, it just kind of fell off. But I don't think anyone reads the vision anyway, but I figured I would state my opinion.
Can I just add to that, what are the regional mobility and accessibility expectations? Is that the federal requirements?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wasn't here when this vision statement was created, but my interpretation would be it's more of a what citizens expect and want in our region.
So it would be public input that was solicited throughout workshops?
I hope it would be.
It's kind of nebulous.
Yeah.
But it's a vision statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible to do a little bit of wordsmithing. I personally like having the term quality of life in there because it is very broad and it's sort of a feel-good thing, but it's good. So.
The one thing I'd say that's maybe missing is economic vitality. I mean, that's kind of important, but I mean, I don't know, you could wordsmith these things all day, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, that was kind of what we thought. I mean, we thought it maybe was good enough to not reopen something that apparently was very difficult to come up with. The idea is for it to be that umbrella statement. I mean, we do get into the specifics here. A couple of things from the vision statement are reiterated, a couple of the same words, mobility and accessibility. We don't have all of these words in there, so we don't have economic vitality in there, but it is there as a goal.
There is a goal.
Yeah.
That's part of what you could wordsmith these things to death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think at the workshop, I mean, probably an hour and 50 minutes were dedicated to development of the goals, and just a little bit of time was spent looking at the vision, and we were pretty good with it at that time.
Would be 2 after that one.
Yeah, that statement took 2 months and a special meeting
For the vision.
for the vision.
Can you live with it, Brandy?
That's why I said no one reads it anyway, so. Yes, I can live with it.
All right.
Thoughts
So
on
should
the
we
goals,
just do one motion for both, or?
Sure.
Do you want to have a little public comment?
Absolutely.
Come on up.
I'm Kathleen Krager, City Traffic Engineer for Colorado Springs, and I'm really struck of the lack of, that land use isn't mentioned here at all in the draft goals. And land use plays such an important key as to how the transportation system ends up being developed. And at PPACG, I wanted to ask you about a comment you made to the board about, well, at the workshop there was an overabundance of land use planners, so you just forgot about land use because it was overdone. And I want to ask about land use and when land use will come into this program. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I apologize if my comment about land use planners was taken that way. It was more to explain some of the differences we saw in the survey results versus at the actual workshop. And the truth of the matter is we did have a lot of planners, whether they were transportation planners or land use or whatever in the room, who do think more about those issues than the general public. So that was one of my interpretations of why we might have had more concerns about land use in the workshop. But nonetheless, so that's where we started filling in here, and I apologize, nothing is legible on this screen. But really the idea is that when we put in land use, the green box, it fell both under economic vitality and under connectivity and accessibility, because that whole marriage between transportation and land use and the distance between destinations and how easy it is to get between them using different modes, in my mind, falls under connectivity and accessibility and also economic vitality. It's certainly possible to use the word or the phrase land use somewhere, whereas we haven't right now, but it's going to come in the next level with the targets and objectives, the more specifics. Brian? Ken, how to?
I was just going to point the finger back at you, Jennifer. You could mention scenarios where we will address different land use futures, possibilities, that in the past we have been told by the board that we do not do land use here and it will not be addressed. Now, that's been a while since that topic has been approached to the board, and obviously it's all new board members since we've been told to sit down and shut up. Maybe it's time to raise the issue again, but we do not do any land use enforcement or planning or urban growth boundaries or anything. It's a completely different approach than what Dr. takes, where they do have a regional land use boundary that all of the local entities have approved and work that through the MPO, but unfortunately we're not that progressive here.
I just think it needs to be brought up every once in a while.
Yes.
In order, because someday it'll have to be addressed.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Ken, and I can't believe I forgot about the scenarios because I'm always talking about them. But it's true. I mean, we are operating in a certain land use environment, and we do talk a lot about that connection between transportation and land use. But the way we get into it a little bit more specifically is the next phase, which we'll be having a workshop in hopefully early June about our scenarios. The underlying piece of the scenarios is land use. We're going to talk about 3 or 4 different types of built environment and how a bunch of different factors like technology and demographic trends play into those. The idea is that the goals cut across any of those land use scenarios. We care about safety whether we're in a more dispersed land use or a more infill type land use, and the same with the others.
So I may have missed it. You said land use was in 2 places? I can only find it under goal 5.
In the green boxes?
Green boxes.
Well, if it's not, it should be. I mean, that's the way we were thinking of it.
Okay, I just want to
So-
make sure I wasn't missing.
We had a lot of cutting and pasting of boxes. But yeah, those are two of the areas where it would be considered.
Okay, so we'll see it in our special meeting or long TAC meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other comments from the committee or from the audience on this item? All right, I would like to see a motion for this. To approve or recommend approval of the vision and goals for the 2050 long-range transportation plan.
Well, as much as I don't like the vision statement, I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
Bob seconds.
All right, thank you.
If I may also mention one other thing, because Ken was giving me a look. I just want to put a little feeler out there that we're staff has been talking about whether it makes sense to scale the plan back to 2045 instead of 2050, because it's better aligned with what CDOT is doing with their revenue projections. We're probably going to come with a formal item for that just to make it official, but I just wanted to put it out there so it wasn't a surprise when it came along. Does anybody have thoughts on that staff should be considering over the next month or so? Everybody gives me the thumbs up.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think
be in
it should
line.
be in line.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So maybe it was just a typo and we really meant 2045.
Should we talk about now about the special meeting?
Yeah, let's.
Oh, thank you.
Let's do an official vote, right? We haven't done that yet? We just have a motion and a second, right?
Okay.
Yes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
So we have the tip, what do we call it? The tip policy meeting before the regular TAC. I would prefer a alternate date, if possible.
Yeah, I would think maybe just send out a couple polls and see. It would be nice to have better attendance if we have a special meeting for the targets and objectives meeting. It would be great to have more participation, but whatever works for.
So I can certainly send out a doodle poll for if we're going to do a special meeting, but is there any sense of, assuming that the special meeting was at a time that you could attend, would you rather have a longer TAC meeting or a special meeting to just have a session completely devoted to targets and objectives?
Well, I think if we have a pretty light agenda next month and we could just devote more time during the regular meeting, that would be ideal. I don't really know of a whole lot.
But if we start at 11:30, I'm not sure how brain dead we're going to be at like 5 o'clock.
So selfishly, I'm not going to be able to. I might not be able to be here for next TAC meeting, and I. You didn't hear me? So, and I miss, and I've always wanted to work with the stakeholders like you guys did, and I missed that one. So I'd like to make one if I could.
I'll just add, I think sometimes on these things, when you're throwing around ideas, it's easier to have a workshop versus in a formal meeting. I guess you could suspend the meeting and then have a workshop, but that's, anyway, just a thought there.
Can I ask one other question? So for those who were not able to attend the special TAC meeting we had on the 21st, did you feel like the summary that was provided in the packet and presentations and such was adequate to give you a feel for what happened there, or was there anything that would be better to share?
I wasn't at the meeting, but I did send a proxy. But I thought the summary was fine. And
Okay.
all the information you included, I mean, you just have to go through it.
Yeah.
Very comprehensive.
Yeah. Unbelievably
Okay.
comprehensive.
More than enough.
I have to say, too, after, being at that meeting, that was a much better venue for a workshop where you're talking about this kind of thing. It was a single table. People were closer together. It was more comfortable. It just kind of promoted interaction a little bit better than this configuration does.
And we were at Mountain Metro for those who. They have better chairs also.
Pretty comfortable.
They're nice.
Very comfortable, yes.
All right, well, we'll take all those things into consideration.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay, item 7C, priority projects. Ken.
Okay, we, last month, or the month before and last month, had decided that we were going to hold off finishing up our discussion on priority projects because we wanted to wait for the city council elections, of which 6 out of the 9 council people were up for election, and what influence that might have on changes in priorities. 3 out of those 6 were replaced, and I understand that none of them are coming to our board, so it will still probably be a while before in any indirect change or small change in direction might occur. In the meantime, just for background purposes, before I introduce Mark, this committee last August had a discussion about priority projects. CDOT presented their 10-year implementation plan, I think it was for the first time, and it went through the committee a couple of times and went to the board. And the interesting thing is, and I don't know why, and Mark, you were here, and maybe you know, this committee and the CAC made a recommendation of, I think it was 5 or 6 projects that should be on CDOT's Tier 1, and CDOT, and after the committees made that recommendation, it for some reason was presented to the board by Craig Casper and Michael Snow 1 month, not Mark, and it was a discussion item. It went to the board twice, and it was a discussion item both times. I don't know why, but CDOT did take the items that were recommended by TAC and incorporated them into their Tier 1 list with a difference in cost distribution. And if you remember, it was whether there was $50 million available for these 2 projects, that being I-25 North and US 24 West. And the TAC had recommended $25 million on each. And that's what the board had recommended. And what wound up being submitted by CDOT Region 2 to Denver was 35 on I-25 North and $15 million on US 24 West. After that, the board in December approved I-25 GAP as its #1 priority project. House Bill 1242 has been submitted for consideration and is going through the committee process now to put out to the voters for election this fall. But it would allow bonding and bring in lots of money for projects on the CDOT's 10-year Tier 1 list. And it is just Tier 1, isn't that correct? Right. So this has kind of forced this item to come back before us now rather than I was going to wait another month to give City Council any chance to get familiar with, make any changes that they wanted to go on that might come over here. But we've got to meet CDOT's deadline that'll be dictated by House Bill 1242. They at least need to discuss their Tier 1 projects on their 10-year implementation plan, because that will be the list of projects that goes to the voters to be funded with all of this money that's going to be brought in. So with that introduction, I will introduce Mark, that everybody knows. And Mark, if I said anything wrong, you can correct me. But
no, thanks for the history. I'd forgotten a lot about the history. Before we get started, again, I'm Mark Andrew with CDOT. I want to introduce Scott Dalton. And Scott Dalton was just promoted. If you stand up, Scott. Scott actually was the ILEX interchange project manager, and we promoted him into a new local agency position. It's a higher level management position to administer our local agency program. So he will Scott will be the contact for all the local agency projects up here. And we've also, with some of the reorg in CDOT, we're going to give him a bigger staff. So we're going to have a North coordinator and a South coordinator, North Program, South coordinator. The North Program coordinator will handle all of PPACG's and Central Front Range's local agency projects. And then we're also going to have a construction technician to oversee those projects in construction. So Scott's going to have a staff of 3 people under him. In addition to that, we've recently hired a consultant to help Scott with the agreements, getting through that process too. So the good news is we're going to staff up the local agency program. Scott has a tremendous amount of experience not only with local agency but design and construction. So he's a great fit for this program. So I just wanted to welcome Scott. Any comments, Scott? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Look forward to working with all of you.
Yeah.
Building some relationships. I'm already seeing some familiar names on the cards. So.
Yeah. So this is a good thing for your local agency projects and for CDOT. So, so we'll get into that discussion, and I appreciate the background, Ken. You know, the history. It's kind of gone back and forth what the board's priorities are, and there's been a lot of discussion between city and county staff too about what would be good priorities. In other words, what would the voters want to see on this ballot if we went forward? So we know if it does go forward, it's going to be likely a $3.5 billion bonding program, about $300 million annually that CDOT will get out of this. What we expect to get from Region 2 is about $688 million in that bonding program. So what we've come up with is, for PPACG, is a number of around $277 million. And I'll go through those projects, get into the presentation here. Let's see, from beginning, at the beginning. There we go, missed it. Okay, so what we're talking about again is House Bill 17-1242, and what we want to focus on really again is what PPACG's priorities have been in the past, what their long-range plan says, and essentially what it says is the same thing we knew 10, 15 years ago, that your priority corridors are broken down like that. I-25 is really still the priority corridor. When I say Fountain to Woodman, it does go to county line, but we'll talk about why I'm focusing on Fountain to Woodman. Powers being still a priority corridor, US 24 East and West and 115. So if you look at all the roads that are coming into Colorado Springs, those continue to be our high priority focus corridors. But we can't lose sight of the other corridors like 94, 83, 85, and 105, and we've had projects on those. Most of those type of projects are being done with our safety program, Faster Safety, or RPP program. So smaller amounts of money, but still important to the corridor. We may not have a lot, if any, projects on this bonding program for the other corridors, but we haven't forgotten about those corridors. We have active projects that we're working on currently. So to give everybody a background of Powers, we look at really, there's 3 segments of Powers. I didn't mention South Powers because it's simply a feasibility study that established an alignment from State Highway 16 down to PPIR back in 2000. So what we're really focused in is North Powers. We did clear that. The city cleared that in 1998 with an EA and Fonzie. I think it may have been 2000. It goes from Woodman to I-25. We still have about $200 million remaining with really the focus on the Powers extension. So that would be from 83 up to I-25. That segment's about $175 million if CDOT were to do the work. The rest would be an interchange at Research and then completing a 6-lane freeway from Woodman all the way to I-25. So around $200 million remaining. Right now, we're looking at the priority project being Research and I-20 or Powers Boulevard. That's where we're getting the congestion. That's where we're getting having the safety issues. If we look at the Central Corridor, that was cleared in 2010 under a separate EA. About $900 million remaining on that corridor to build it as a freeway from essentially State Highway, well, Proby Parkway up to Woodman with right-of-way prioritization, and from State Highway 16 up to Proby. So the real meat of the project is from Proby up to Woodman. That's the $900 million freeway that we still have yet to build. The board's priorities in the past is always considered Carefree North and South Constitution, or North and South Carefree with Constitution being the primary project. That's where we're getting the most traffic. And you know, the EA predicted that would still be the priority location. But we're seeing a trend from 40,000 vehicles per day. In some cases, we're now getting 70,000 vehicles per day. So we're seeing Powers becoming a congested corridor with the need to really look at those freeway projects in the future. So again, we've identified Constitution, North and South Carefree as a full interchange complex for $115 million. And the environmental document, if you go back to it, recommended that proposed action at that location. We've had discussions about continuous flow intersections in the past. The issue we're having with CFIs is we really haven't studied them enough to know if they're really a feasible option to replace a grade-separated interchange. So at this point, we had it on the long-range plan list or the 10-year capital list as a CFI. CDOT would like to pull that off the list and replace it with an interchange because, again, until we know that they work and they're cost-effective, we don't want to commit to the public that we're going to build something that may or may not work. So that's the history of Powers. So I-25, really the focus was State Highway 16 to Monument. That was the original EA that was cleared in 2005. We built several improvements, including Cosmics, with that EA, and a lot of projects before the EA was completed. But we still have about $250 to $350 million remaining, with the main focus of what we termed as the HOV lanes that go from South Academy up to, I believe it's Briargate, could be Interquest, but that essentially, with some other smaller projects, including the widening from Circle to Academy, would complete the environmental document. So obviously with widening to 8 lanes, that's a very expensive project. We don't think that's necessarily needed right now if we were to look at ramp metering. Not to say it's not needed in the future, but we think the next step from going from 6 to 8 lanes would be ramp metering. Again, some of those operational improvements that we're going to be required to look at. And again, they've worked in other larger urban areas. That's kind of the next step, if you will, before you go to 8 lanes. Now, if we do go to 8 lanes in the future, those HOV lanes could be express lanes. They could be, built with tolling potentially. If we get enough growth and congestion in the future, that may pay for those HOV lanes. But again, for the purposes of this list, we really want to focus on where we're seeing the congestion today. So again, a board priority has always been that Circle to Academy section, to construct it from 4 to 6 lanes. We've just recently priced it at $68 million. And then we are also looking at white topping from South Academy all the way down to Fountain. And we think, because of the congestion we're seeing at least down to State Highway 16, that we should add another $40 million plus the $20 million for pavement rehab to complete a $60 million job to get us to 6 lanes down to State Highway 16. That would be mile marker 132. Another congestion point we're seeing, and something that needs to be completed according to the environmental assessment, is Garden of the Gods to Fillmore. We don't have the auxiliary lanes built between those two interchanges, and we're seeing a lot of congestion as a result of that, and we're actually seeing a lot of accidents with the slowing. So we'd like to throw that in the mix. We can't go to ramp metering unless we look at the ramps, including those ramps and auxiliary lanes that connect those two interchanges. So we think that's a good project for $25 million that we'd like to add to the list, and then ramp metering for $6 million. So we're looking at about $140 million that we'd like to add to the Tier 1 list. And I know, Ken, this is the first time you've seen this discussion, but things are happening fairly quickly. We were able to add about another $100 million to the Tier 1 list for PPACG. So that's part of the discussion, is really I-25 makes sense, because that's where we're seeing the congestion, that's where we're seeing the accidents.
So what you're proposing here in the red mark, when we're all finished, that all total up to this $277 million?
Yes.
And Mark, the stuff in red, it's not on your list here?
That's correct. It wasn't on the. Some of it was on the previous 10-year list. It's always been on the Tier 2 list, but because we're reshuffling the deck and looking at population in terms of how it might work with the voters, we've decided that, PPACG, El Paso County being about 13% of the population, that we really were underrepresented in terms of the number of projects and the dollar amounts. So I think there's been a positive move to try to rebalance Region 2 to try to get more in the Pikes Peak area. So again, what we're trying to focus on, again, are those priority corridors, and then where we're seeing the accidents and congestion mainly. 24 West. Now, again, this was, part of the discussion that Ken was talking about, putting some money on 24 West. Now, the overall project that was cleared was a $270 million expressway that goes from I-25 to Manitou. And grade separations at 8th Street, I believe at 31st Street, and an overpass at Ridge Road. So an expensive project. We're not going to have enough money to build that $270 million project. But again, it is on the Tier 2 list. All of these clear projects we've listed on that Tier 2 list for about $1.7 billion. So if we were to get that 277 or 300 million with this bonding program, what could we do on 24 West? Well, we've looked at 21st, 31st, and those are funded with safety improvements. So we are going to add turn lanes and address some of the safety issues that we've seen at those locations. We've also completed a quarter CFI at Cimarron and 8th Street, which will significantly improve 8th Street. But, 8th Street, in the EA is called for a grade-separated interchange. Another option may be a CFI. So priority projects would be that Ridge Road overpass at $20 million or a CFI at 8th Street. So those are a couple options that we could throw $20 million at. Now, we said 15, but we'd like to bring that up to 20 because Ridge Road, if we do build the overpass, is $20 million. There are options to Ridge Road that PPACG has listed on their priority list, including doing at-grade improvements, safety improvements like right-in, right-outs with pedestrian access via a pedestrian overpass, which would be around $5 to $7 million. So there are other options that we can look at Ridge Road in lieu of that $20 million. So for this purposes, I'll get to the final conclusion here about what CDOT's going to recommend. I think we're recommending to go with minor improvements on 24 West. But again, that's open for discussion. Yeah.
On the plan, I'm reading this right, the US 24 West, I-25 to Woodland Park, drainage intersection.
Right.
That just get dropped?
Well, it wouldn't get dropped. The drainage improvements are mainly at Cascade, and they're really left over from debris flow from the fire. And we do have some culverts that we would like to upsize. That project would be $2 to $3 million to improve that drainage. So almost too small a project to list on this project list. We may be able to address that with another funding source. Well, it included a lot of improvements at Cascade, including the intersection at Cascade. And we could look at Cascade again, but Cascade intersection may be more of an operational improvement rather than, or a minor intersection improvement rather than a complete reconstruction of the intersection that some were suggesting. So right now where we're seeing the congestion is 8th Street, and we're seeing some congestion at 21st and 31st Street, but we think we can assist that with some of the safety projects. Now, again, we're not going to forget about Cascade and the drainage issues, but we think we may be able to fund those with a different type of funding.
Just to point out on that 31st, since they've changed if you're going eastbound and you hit 31st, where they've made that left turn to where you can only turn on the arrow, that backup in the mornings is, you come around that curve, and even though they have that sign, sometimes you can see the traffic swerving around because they're missing it, they're not used to it.
And that's what we're talking about, is extending the turn lanes, improving the turn lanes with funding that we already have. So,
and once the amount of traffic takes the turn, it ends up backing into 24 because so many cars have made the turn on the arrow, and they stop at Colorado.
Yeah.
And now they can't continue to turn on the arrow.
It's I keep on thinking that people are going to get tired of it and turn left on upstream.
Ridge Road.
Yeah, Ridge Road.
And they may.
They already do.
They already do.
They already do.
Yeah. And so I've asked my team to look at that, to see.
It still backs up, that left-hand turn lane gets into the queue comes back into the lane right next to it.
Through
Yep.
lane.
And what we really need is another lane between 24 and Colorado
Or improved.
and restripe it. Kathleen might have some other comments on it.
The traffic engineer's going crazy. I'm sorry. The reason why that left turn arrow had to go protected only was because of the high number of fatalities that we had. The reason why we were having actual fatalities on those left turns is there's small raised medians on 24, and they built them so that they are sort of line up, but that means that the left turners don't line up. So if there's someone in the left turn lane going westbound to turn south, they block the view of the eastbound turning north to see what oncoming through traffic is about to hit them. And so that's why we're stuck in this awful situation right now. But there is a design project going on right now. It will remove that raised median right at the intersection so that we can use little stripes instead of raised median, get those left turns directly across from each other, and then hopefully put it back to permissive protected. At the same time doing work on Colorado Avenue. Right now it's not, with construction and everything, it's not a great time to be messing with signal timing. But you may not have noticed it, we have radar installed on both the intersection of 31st and US 24 and on Colorado Avenue and 31st. that radar will help us to know what the two are operating like between each other so that those two can work more in harmony and let people through. But until we can get into that construction and take out those medians, bear with us because it's just going to be ugly. And trust me, I pull it up on the big screen at my office every morning and look at it and go,
So I dropped it down every morning.
yeah. I'm probably watching you. Yeah.
So that's part of the problem. The other part is between and 31st Street, between Colorado and US 24, you just simply don't have enough room there, enough lanes, and that right turn lane and the through right turn lane backs up into US 24. So that's why, I've asked my team to take a look at adding more lanes on 31st Street between Colorado and 24, at least extending the right turn lane that turns south onto Colorado. Because again, that backs up into US 24, and I've seen that. That's probably contributing to some of the accidents. But so again, the intersections, we've got money and we've got another source to address those, just like Cascade, if we had to. So I've asked my traffic folks to take a look at Cascade to see what we can do, and Kathleen has been involved in that too, to see if we can't get a project going sooner, independent of this effort, to try to address it sooner rather than later. So.
And I would just add, the county's interested in that as well. We have some improvements there that we're looking at from a pedestrian standpoint that we'd like to coordinate with all the other improvements. So we've been talking extensively with the city and CDOT about trying to come up with a unified improvement project at that location.
So Mark, that's all great. I love all the improvements that are happening in towards the Springs and Cascade and Manitou. But all the traffic's continuing on west, and you get to Woodland Park, and it's congested.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we get our some of our local goals, and this was the PEL study, for instance, for the reliever route for Woodland Park, on this list, on your list here?
So I do think it has to become a board priority to fund it. And right now, the latest I've heard is they're backing away from wanting to fund that right now.
Well,
it's not to say that it's not going to stay on the long-range plan, but they're backing away from moving forward with it. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't want to take a look at the feasibility and reopen the reliever route study that was done. And we were involved in those discussions. What I heard was that there was concern about going forward with the PEL without funding to build the project. It could be a $100 to $200 million project. It's not going to raise real high in the priority list for PPACG. It's going to sit there on the list for many years, and it becomes almost an aggravation for property owners. If you go through that planning process and you define property that you're going to take without funding, in some cases, you're opening yourself up to inverse condemnation, where the property owners could come back and say, you don't have a real funded project here. Therefore, you're opening your liability up. And I think that was some of the concerns that we had, or we saw. Not to say that it's not going to be needed in the future, but there's a timing with those type of projects that you've got to time it. And right now we're not seeing that type of project raise to the top. Correct me if I'm wrong, I just don't think it's going to compete construction-wise with these other $1.7 billion projects that we have on the list. So maybe there's something interim, and I suggested that we could maybe not go to a full PEL, but look at the study that was done, maybe go out to the public, the community, and say, what do you think? We could do this, we could make it a priority, and get some opinions from the locals and get some feedback to the board before we move forward with a full PEL study.
So what needs to happen for even that amount of?
Well, I think Woodland Park and Teller County need to come together and change their decision, because their decision was to not move forward with it right now.
I don't know if that was a decision or a discussion.
It was a discussion.
And
It was a discussion. We took it as a decision.
right, and the discussion was they did want to move forward, at least with the PEL. That has always been a priority, or one of the priority items at the local level here at the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. And so the question is how to move it up into an area where it's a CDOT priority, and it would also, reduce some of the congestion you're seeing on 24 through Woodland Park and through Cascade potentially.
I think it needs to start here, and I think it needs to go to the board. And what are you going to give up? I mean, if you're going to do the $3 million RPP study, are you going to give up other projects? And then where does it land on the priority list for future construction? I mean, that's going to be the discussion. And so I'm not saying it can't rise to the top in terms of the PEL, but it's, we're going to have to give up something to fund that. So that's where it goes. I think it starts here. If you want to add it to this list, we may have to take something off. We'll see.
Two questions, Mark.
Yep.
On this one, you have two. Is it one or the other, or both?
It's one or the other.
Okay.
And it may not be either.
Okay.
So when we get to the end, I'll show you what our thinking is, because can we address the priorities on 24 without this program? In other words, are there other funding options that we may be able to address it without, impacting other priority projects? And that's going to be a discussion. What do you want to give up? What do you want to add? So
then the second question is, maybe for you and Laura, or maybe one, I don't know who can answer it, but is the study that you're talking about, is it the one that I've heard about that essentially is the bypass for Woodland Park?
yes.
Okay.
It was done 10, 15 years ago, I think.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
There's community buy-in on the bypass?
I don't know if it was ever presented, but I think at the time, no. I think it was, but, the congestion's gotten worse, and we don't know. I mean, that's the question. Before you spend $3 million on a PEL study, I think you might want to find out what the public thinks. That's what I think.
Mark, I don't have the vast experience that Kathleen does, but if I could vote, I would vote for 5 instead of 4, because I think 8th Street's got more issues than Ridge Road. Again, driving it every day.
And if we can find an alternate for Ridge Road to build a pedestrian overpass to make that connectivity to Ridge Rock with the open space, and we can do some safety improvements at Ridge Road to either make it a 3/4 restricted movement or right in, right out. Because what we're seeing is we're getting the accidents because people want to travel from north to south or south to north. They want to shoot across that high-speed congested traffic. And so that's the movement that we need to look at, restricting, and then the left's out, too. That's a very difficult movement as well.
I would just say that, that whole process went through an EA. I mean, I'd hate to reduce that scope of work for that project until that went through a reevaluation. I just put it on the ballot or a ballot, and you assume something, and what happens if that changes? So I guess that's something that concerns me. And I know we've done a lot of improvements, and I know that there's, I know you guys need to reevaluate once you get Cimarron done how 8th Street really operates as well. So I think that there's pros and cons to both.
It's hard because there's a lot of opinions out there. What would a typical voter want? If they were voting for this program, would they want to see an overpass at Ridge Road, or would they rather see more improvements at 8th Street? So that's hard to say. But I will say, we're not going to see this type of funding for a long time. So we want to make sure we get it right. And so we know where the congestion and the safety issues are. Ridge Road is a safety problem, not so much a congestion problem. So if we can solve the safety problem and link the pedestrians with an overpass, the pedestrians and bicycle traffic, we may solve the issues with that at a cheaper price. So, but if we miss the boat at 8th Street, it's going to be many years before we can improve 8th Street. The CFI, I think, will work. The quarter CFI we built with Cimarron, or building with Cimarron, may solve the problem for quite a few years. But again, we know that that's a very congested point, and we may want to continue the CFI work and finish it.
So I don't want to get all the way to the end and then learn the answer to this question, but if I'm understanding it correctly, and I hope I'm wrong, are we just trading dollars with House Bill 17-1242, basically making it so you can bond, but it's going to be, we're losing money here and we're gaining money here, but because we're bonding it, we're going to spend it now?
The proposal is to lose the faster safety program. We don't know how we're going to make up those dollars.
Right.
I don't have any speaking points on that. I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't know what to tell you. I've got projects ready to go with faster safety funds. And I don't know if that means that we're going to cut it off at 2020 or we're going to cut it off at 2022. I don't know when the cutoff is. But will there be another funding source to replace faster safety? That's the discussion item.
And is it a one-to-one, or is it 150 million to 300 million? Is there a ratio there?
Our faster safety program is probably that. I would say we're gaining, we're probably doubling, if not tripling, the money we had from faster safety.
Okay.
And then we're able to bond that money,
Right.
which gives us $3.5 billion to make the improvements now. So
Right.
I don't think we can bond the faster safety program. So I think that's the problem.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I'll just interject. House Bill 1242, as it was originally submitted, did include a 0.62% sales tax increase that has been amended down to 0.5% so far.
And it's still continuing through the process.
It is.
To be amended further.
And I've even recently,
percentages too.
yeah, I've even recently heard it may die altogether. So it may have today. I don't know. No.
Sure. It's interesting how this ties into our tip modification meeting earlier. But anyway, you've got the Ridge Road US 24 project, CFI to 8th Street. Not sure details of either project. Would it make sense to do a corridor safety and operations from Ridge Road to 8th and kind of leave it a little more open?
And we've hired a consultant to look at what the priority project should be from 8th Street to Manitou.
But I mean on the ballot language.
Just leave it vague? Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That way you don't have to pick.
Yes.
We don't have to
Yeah.
pick one or the other.
We may do that,
Yeah.
yes. We may do
I
that, but
was like, man.
I think for the purposes,
Or maybe a slush fund.
A pool. Strike that.
we'll see. But yes, I think we're going to go for, if we can't define the project, we're going to define the corridor.
Okay.
Yes. So we'll see. But I think it's important to know for the TAC, CAC, and board what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm. What could be addressed in that corridor.
Right. So there's no surprises.
Right. With an understanding you can't do everything, but these are the opportunities you'd like to look at and consider addressing.
So the next corridor, again, is part of that priority corridor, is 24 East. Many years ago, we had, many of you may remember House Bill 1310, we had funding to continue the widening of 24 potentially out to Falcon and beyond. We didn't really define the limits, but we ended up taking that money and putting it on 24 West. That was a board decision to finish the EA for 24 West. So many years ago, it was still a high priority corridor. We are currently underway with the planning and environmental linkage study. that will look at improvements from Powers all the way out to Rama. But Rama, I keep saying that backwards. It depends on who you ask. But on the PPACG priority list right now, the first one would be to widen from Garrett to Stapleton, and we've just priced that out at $40 million. We think that this should be a Tier 1 priority because we're seeing a lot of congestion out east. That's where the growth is going. That's where you've got 4- and 6-lane roads planned with the county to connect into our 2-lane rural highway. The road is not going to perform. It's not performing now. It's not going to perform in the future. In fact, I think we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on the PEL study. So this is a project, even though we're still in the environmental stage, I think it should be considered to rise to the top in terms of a priority. And again, we're looking, this is all in PPACG, goes to Stapleton Road, which I still believe is close to the PPACG limit. So this would still be a popular project for eastern El Paso County, including the Central Front Range as well. So it makes sense from that standpoint. And
So are the, for instance, the thresholds of congestion and safety and all the other issues that this PPL is addressing, are they greater than what's happening out west? Is that how
well,
this got
yes, I think in terms of the roadway being able to support the growth out there, we're seeing problems out there. We're seeing, for many years, we've had a lot of accidents on this road due to congestion and inadequate intersections, and we've gone through and improved almost every intersection. But now we're seeing the growth and the congestion, and we're seeing a lot of cut-through traffic on the county roads. So what we're seeing is if you want to get to Schriever Air Force Base, get off at 24 because it's too congested and take one of the county roads. So it does have a that type of issue, and we're starting to see that in the PEL study as well. It has impacts for local roads. To weigh it compared to 24 West versus 24 East, the growth is happening on both sides. But I think if you look at the growth boundary, this is where the growth is going. It's going northeast. These are where the big developments are planned, and a lot of the major roads are tying into 24 East. And it's hard to design an intersection when you've got 6 lanes going into a 2-lane rural highway. It's a challenge.
So not being part of the PEL for the 24 East, is that study looking at our Stapleton Briargate Parkway connection from US 24 to I-25, and if that provides any relief and redistribution of traffic?
It will look at that. Yeah, it will look at that.
And we do have an RTA study funded to analyze that corridor.
So our PL will look at that, but again, we're not seeing the relief in terms of congestion out there. It's a major truck route. It's a U.S. highway.
Right, but I guess my point is, it'd be and there's a chance where that new alignment could be in the U.S. 24. Because
well, I would just say we've already made the connection in the county with Stapleton and US 24. It's just not made between the city and the county. So right. Stapleton, as it crosses, is already connected at US 24. We did that with PPRTA funds. So we're anticipating, we have many county roads at this point that are 4-lane into a 2-lane highway. So
I think your question is, does it provide relief to 24? I think that's a difficult answer because you're seeing so much growth out there that, yeah, it could provide relief, but the growth is not taking the need off of, the widening need for 24. So, again, we think it should be a priority project. And again, it was a priority many years ago for PPACG.
When did this PEL start?
A year ago.
And
yeah. We've got probably about another 6 to 9 months before we're done. Right now, we've got $1 million from PPACG and $1 million from Central Front Range. Okay.
Falcon has been the fastest growing part of El Paso County and almost the state. So you look at the population in 2000, I think it was like maybe 9,000 or 10,000 in that general area, and we're seeing the population at this point is 50 to 60,000 at this point, just in the Falcon area, and that doesn't include the outlying areas. So it's pretty significant. It's essentially an unincorporated city. It's kind of interesting.
So again, you look at, what would the voters like to see, and then the other question is what if we don't do this? What if we wait for 20 years and we miss the funding opportunity? What will 24 look like?
So that PEL for this East Highway 24 was never on your list.
It was on the, it's in the Tier 2 list. It was always on the Tier 2 list. And it's always been a board priority since I've been here. It's always been on the long-range plan. So kind of moving down the list here. So this is another project that we think ought to be on the Tier 1, but it's open to discussion. We have a bottleneck between Rock Creek Bridge and about a couple miles to the south. We go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes back to 4 lanes. Right now we're not seeing a whole lot of congestion from it, but in terms of, again, that priority corridor and the growth that we're seeing, in the Canyon City and Penrose area, this might be and should be a priority for PPACG. We've tried to fund this section for years. We've done a lot of safety improvements to complete the widening through this section, with this section being the last project on the list, if you will. So 115 has always kind of been a priority corridor for Central Front Range and also for PPACG. So we think 26 million may be high. We're going to look at that number again, but for now that's the number we were recently giving. I assumed it was always 10 to 15 million, but I was kind of shocked to see it 26. So we don't need necessarily to buy right away. We've got to replace the bridge at Rock Creek and then widen for about 1.5 miles. So. And then, of course, the big project that is on the list, the Tier 1 list, the I-25 C-470 Monument Project. We are still showing at the very bottom, you see 30 million from Region 2. We're still showing, Ken said 35. I think it's 30 that we're going to put on the Tier 1 list that we are going to take off the top and give to Region 1 for our portion that goes from that gap between Monument and El Paso County line. That's our contribution to the project. But it will be administered through our Region 1 region, and they'll just put it on their list, even though it won't necessarily show on our list. We're just going to take the 30 million off the top and give it to them. So the background on this is a PEL that started 6 to 9 months ago. We are looking at finishing the study, including doing an environmental assessment for the GAP project from Monument to Castle Rock for this section, and then also finishing the design, all of that within the next 2.5 years, ready for construction sometime in 2019. We do have the funding for that project to finish the design and the environmental process, but this may be, if not the one, it's at least the top 1 or 2 priorities at CDOT right now. So it'll stay on the Tier 1 list.
that there's been some different estimates, and, you know, the low being like about 270 and the high being 500. I know that we've kept our 30 million pretty straightforward.
Yes.
Has there been discussions at Dr. Cog, or, you know, up in that area in regards to changing their number? Or I'm hearing that they're still, you know, showing their 270, so looks like it's going to be the 300 million.
Right. I don't know. They're keeping it at 300 million, yes, or 270. We've simply said 400 to 500 million because we don't know what's going to be the recommended alternative out of that PL. We think that 6 lanes is enough, but we don't know if we need to widen it to 8 lanes. So that's why we're keeping the flexibility of a higher cost estimate. So here's the bottom line. Okay, so looking at all the projects, first what we want to focus on is I-25 congestion relief from Fountain to North Academy. And what we think should be a priority is Garden of the Gods to fill more auxiliary lanes, building those, ramp metering, making that connection or that widening from South Academy to Circle, and then also looking at State Highway 16 to South Academy for another 40, because we're going to add to that 40 million, that bottom project, we are going to add another 20 million of asset management or surface treatment money to do white topping. And so it will be more like a $60 million job. But we think we should go ahead and look at widening. We will have to do a separate environmental document for that section. We may be able to do it as a CADX, a very simplified environmental assessment process. We think there's minimal right-of-way and minimal impact. So we think that's a good project. Those projects total at $140 million for I-25 congestion relief. Again, if you were to look at the needs of the corridor, what we're missing is really that 8-lane widening with the HOV lanes that could be built in the future with express lanes or tolling. Powers Boulevard, what we would like to look at, of course, is 21 in research. That's the bottleneck we're seeing. We would like to consider putting 10 million on this list for I-25 and 21 interchange to improve the interchange in conjunction with what the developer is building. We still have improvements at the shoulders are non-standard. The bridges aren't wide enough on I-25, so we would like to contribute some money to that project to bring that up to standard. We never did bring that up to standard. We did the widening a few years ago. So we'd like to consider adding that to the Tier 1 list.
Is that Mesa Ridge then, I-25 and 21? Where's that at?
He's talking up north.
Air Force Academy to Northgate.
Northgate.
Oh, okay.
It's Copper Ridge
Northgate.
Development,
Okay.
Northgate Development, yeah. And then the other projects, we talked about the 30 million for the GAP project, the 40 million for US 24 Garrett to Stapleton, 26 million for 115 Rock Creek South, for a total of 277 million of the 668 that we're getting for Region 2, and that's about 41%. So I'm going to leave it up for discussion, but a couple projects that we think could drop off the list is the expensive interchange at Powers and Constitution and Carefree, and then the 20 million on US 24 I-25 divide, simply because we think we might be able to address those needs with other projects or other funding types. The real issue is, I think it's up to you. It's up to the board. Do they have other options here that we've missed? The list is going to be longer than we have money for, but in discussions with Karen Rowe and Others, it kind of makes sense that these should be the priorities, but if you do add any more projects, something else is going to have to come off that list. So that's
who determined the $277 million number?
that's typically what we get in terms of our PP funds.
So that's just our normal percentage?
It's pretty much our normal percentage. The 668 is our normal percentage for Region 2.
Right.
So when you look at all the percentages between all the planning regions, that's pretty, and the 41% may be a little low, but we're also getting funded, which you don't see here, is the GAP project for $270 million. So that is even though that's a priority, yeah, that's an added bonus, if you will. So even though that's not in our planning region, it's kind of a shared priority, if you will.
The RPP monies aren't being reduced, though, are they?
No. No. So I'm going to leave it up for further discussion. If there's another project you want, if you want that 21 in Constitution, you're going to have to take away from something else. If you want 24 West, you're going to have to take away from something else.
Mark, what is that very last line? 20 million US 24, I-25?
To divide, yes. That's 24
Kind of
West.
like what I was suggesting, is instead going further west.
Going further west, like to...
Yeah, instead of stopping Ridge Road, you're going all the way to Divide.
Right. So it could be Cascade. It could be improvements at, it could be the reliever route PEL that's funded with that $20 million, but you're going to have to take something from somewhere. Now, what I want to look at, this estimate seems very high to me. And we may be able to, if we can get this down, maybe we can add $10 million in on US 24 and fund some of those priorities.
Why do we go to divide it? It's beyond Ms. Cogg's jurisdiction.
That was a request for, I think Norm's team wanted us to look at improvements all the way to Divide. And I think Karen wanted to look at it too, to make sure we didn't miss anything. Yes, it's Woodland Park. We're not contemplating any improvements between Woodland Park and Divide, so we can change that. That's not a big deal. Now, State Highway 67 between Divide and Cripple Creek, we are looking at doing some shoulder widening for Central Front Range on that corridor. So, but years ago, that widening project between Woodland Park and Divide was funded, and we don't see any additional improvements needed in that segment.
Is there any negotiation on that I-25 Highway 21 interchange with Copper Ridge for them to pay a little bit more?
They don't have it. They don't have it. And plus, we won't get our improvements done at the interchange that we need to. So. I don't know if Kathleen, you know more about their bonding program, but I think they have $37 million.
They currently have bonding for $37 million. They're expecting to go up to bonding to $71 million as a second phase. And their plan, basically, they're the only ones with money at the table at the moment. So they're doing design right now and looking what it is they can build with their Phase 1 money and then their Phase 2 money. So it's not that we should be asking them for $10 million more. This is CDOT putting $10 million in to do the improvements at that area that probably should have been done when we widened I-25 to 6 lanes in there. But we sort of cheaped it out in order to get I-25 to 6 lanes all the way up to Monument. We really did that as cheaply as we could. So, Brian, would this be an okay time for the city to tell you what they think of these things? Thank you. I just wanted to let you know the city has had a chance to look at these projects and that type of thing, and so I wanted to let you know our feelings on them. There is a lot of money here that is not specifically within the city of Colorado Springs, but we are good with all of the I-25 projects. I think they're reasonable. There really is what's needed, and whether they're within the city or not, we'll feel an impact from that. So that's good. State Highway 21, yeah, I'd love to get that. What what am I missing there, 270 million, but, okay, never mind, that's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's really important, and we're doing design on it right now, to get an interchange built at State Highway 21 in Research that is causing significant accident problems and one of our worst delay problems in the city. And good with putting that money into I-25 at where Powers will come out on I-25, because those improvements have to be made in order to make that connection. It'd be nice to get started with something on Constitution. On the other hand, I can let it go for a while, because to be truthful, the city will open up its first CFI later this year, early next year. I'd like to take an opportunity to watch that CFI for a year before I commit to further design such as that one. So I'm ready to let that go for a while so that we know exactly and for sure what design will work best on Constitution. The US 24 improvements out to the east is a 4-lane I'm fine with. I do think it's an opportunity that we need to start opening that door to talk about the urban sprawl aspect of out east, and at what point do we look at country county life and urban life. And because we cannot continue to support 4- and 6-lane highways through the entire county. It's too broad of an area. So I think there does need to be a discussion among our elected officials of what is that boundary and how do we establish that boundary. Good with the Rock Creek Bridge on 115. I'm fine with postponing Constitution carefree work. I'm also fine with postponing what we were looking at Ridge Road and at 8th Street. Ridge Road, I think we have some good, cheaper alternatives. We need to go to the neighborhood and have some neighborhood meetings and see how they feel about it and that type of thing. But I think we've got some alternatives that we could put other funding together to get something done there. And to be truthful, on 8th, we've got the 1/4 CFI coming in. That's a very directional intersection, and I'd like to see how that works. The other quarter of the CFI that we would be building with this would be for the eastbound to northbound left turns at 8th Street that then go to Colorado Avenue and go downtown. I'm hoping that Cimarron interchange is going to be so pleasant that people will decide to stay on US 24 all the way and go to downtown that way instead of cutting off onto Colorado Avenue and cutting off onto 8th Street. And if that's true, then the work that we're doing out there right now could last for many years. So that's the stand that the city's going to take on this, and I'd be happy to answer questions or let other jurisdictions talk about what they want to do.
I appreciate the city's comments. Unfortunately, the city of Woodland Park hasn't had the ability to look at any of these, and this is the first time I've seen this. If you're good to lose the $20 million on the US 24-25 divide, is there any way we could focus that on the PEL for Woodland Park? Maybe just put in $3 million there and
I'm
bump
going
it
to
up the list?
always known for my bluntness. I'll do you a big favor and say no. I honestly, and spending years and years as a consultant doing big studies for CDOT, I'm going to tell you truthfully, Woodland Park really needs to go to their voters and that type of thing and make sure that that's what they want, because there are numerous towns around Colorado that have built their infamous bypasses, and it has not gone the way that they wanted it to go. So if you were to ask me as a truly aging traffic engineer, transportation planner, what I would do at Woodland Park, I wouldn't dream of doing a bypass because you have a lovely downtown area and all that, and I wouldn't want it to die out of lack of activity. And instead, I'd be looking at what you do in the downtown area to make it more comfortable. But bear in mind that you're sort of in a two-way jigsaw pattern here. You want to end congestion, but something tells me that you do not want traffic traveling 60 miles per hour through the middle of Woodland Park. That if that speed increased at all, Woodland Park would want to complain to CDOT. And part of keeping your speed down to what is a comfortable level and what your posted speed limits are through the middle of Woodland Park is having some of that congestion. I think that bypass truly might be a 10-year-old idea or a 15-year-old idea that has come and gone, and you might want to get comment from your people, and then we can start looking for, do you do a study on downtown Woodland Park and what you're hoping for and that type of thing. But I would hate to see you go the way of Bayfield or any of the other communities that have done a bypass and then gone, whoops, that really hurt.
Right. Great comments, great comments. The bypass study has come, but it's never gone.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming up and up. We have gone back. We have gone back with congestion studies, how to make downtown better, how to bring the Main Street back. We've gone around and around, and it always comes back to a bypass. Or let's call it a reliever route. So the question is, I mean, you just said yourself, you're willing to leave those as other options, and, you know, you can come up with your own funds instead of $20 million. How can I get $3 million of that $20 million and bump it up this list?
Well, for example, I've already said, yes, those things can leave. If Mark were to tell me that he'd save $3 million somewhere, would I immediately grab it and say I have to have it? No. I'm telling you that top part of the list, above the total 277, 41%, the city of Colorado Springs is good with.
Right. Right.
And one more comment. I think what might, and I just was thinking of this, that, you know, maybe that we can carve out a little bit of money and look at the operations and take a look at what does the traffic look like now, and what would it look like if we did some planning studies. What would it look like in 10, 20 years? What would the operations look like? So maybe we can do some rough projections and see, you know, when does we reach a point where we're going to have to do something through Woodland Park from a congestion standpoint. I see it congested. We're going to get there eventually, but I think the question of the bypass, again, I don't think we're there yet compared to these other priorities. But again, what we could do is, and maybe not, the bypass wouldn't fall onto this list, but we can take a look at this $26 million, and if we can reduce this cost, because I think it's high, we might be able to add some more money back into I-25 to divide and start addressing some of these concerns for some of these smaller projects. And again, leave it vague. So what I'm going to go back and take a look at that estimate, but we have to make sure the other estimates are accurate too. One of the things we've done at CDOT is all the regions are doing the same type of estimating. We've got the same type of program. We've got a staff helping us review those estimates to make sure they're accurate. So what we don't want to have happen is we undercommit to the voters that we can't build these projects. So we want to make sure the costs are right. So we're actually aiming a little high on some of these costs.
Right. Well, and it just seems to me that $3 million for Woodland Park is such a small amount.
And again, there may be, if you look at that RPP list and project it out to 2025, 2026, you know, PPACG may want to put that on the RPP list too in a few years. So that's an option. And I do believe it may be on the RPP list in 2025, 2026.
I think
can't remember.
Isn't it? Isn't that what this list is, Ken?
It's just a priority list, then
Well, I think we have
doesn't identify funding.
right. I think we have a RPP list, even though it's not funded. We're going to get that money. We might be able to put it on there. Another project in Woodland Park is the widening that's sitting on the shelf, the drainage and widening improvements that you've got on 67.
Right, 67 North, and that's great. I guess I'm just going to keep saying the same thing. If there's any way we can actually remove the word divide, because that's
Oh, sure.
beyond your jurisdiction, and
Yeah.
put Woodland Park in there, so at least Woodland Park is on there. And then it'd be great if we could have something in parentheses that would say, including a reliever route. you know? I mean, because really there are improvements that need to happen to
Right.
Highway 24, sure. But the big item is the really. So.
You know, Ken, I think, do you want to just bring that forward to the board when they have this discussion? Because we'll present it to CAC and then we'll present it to the board. And they can have that discussion too. So we'll take that comment.
Jennifer?
Just say, I think you've done a great job in trying to balance a lot of competing needs, and I think from a county standpoint, I support what you've put together. I guess in just regards to the other options, I do think as far as a priority, I think it would be good to put some money on US 24. I guess from my perspective,
Was that east or west, Jennifer?
West.
Thank you.
That's the bottom line.
Okay, yeah. Just a second.
In my opinion, you look at the other options, that would be the priority, and I would recommend we try to have broad language so that we could pick the appropriate project as we kind of discussed. I just would say I think the goal of this program and the ballot issue is actually to put money on the ground, and I think that that's what the voters are going to expect. And while I support that you probably need to have some study up there in Woodland Park, I'm not sure that this is the correct vehicle. Thank you.
So I would piggyback that just for a passage of the ballot issue to get Teller County brought into the fold. Is there's any way you can put US 24 West kind of piggybacking it, if you can shave some money off of Rock Creek, I think that'd be helpful.
I get it. It's a good comment. Yeah, we'll look at it.
So what happens next, Mark, with this list, or what?
Well, so we have to have this in front of the commission in May, our Transportation Commission. And what they're expecting is, and they haven't really given the PPACG process a time frame, they want us to go back to our planning partners between May and June to solidify the list for final adoption in June. But I started now because it's a 2-month process through PPACG. So this is the beginning of the end, if you will. I mean, we're gonna come back, I think, to the TAC unless the board passes resolution. I think we'll eventually get to the board in the next 2 months, not in May, but in June for final adoption from the board. Actually, it's got to be in May that they've got to adopt this.
My understanding from Karen Rowe's email to Andy Pico was that she needed an answer for CDOT by June 1, which means the board has to approve it at its next meeting in May. So this would be a meeting, a time for recommendation today to go to the board for its next meeting.
Mark, I just have a curious question for my own ignorance. So the list that was presented to us in September, the list that's attachment 3 in our packet here,
Mm-hmm.
This is what's being proposed to supersede that list?
Yes.
All right, so there are three, 4 park and ride expansion projects, Woodman, Monument, Tejon, that were on the September list.
Well, those are transit projects. Those are not going to be. So there'll be that's a separate thing that we won't. My understanding is pedestrian, bicycle, and transit projects will have its separate funding. That's another thing I didn't bring up. It's potential, if we do an overpass at Ridge Road, we may be able to get that type of money for that type of project. So, so yeah, it's those aren't eliminated, but they're through a different process.
So, Mark, just to be clear, because there's the Tier 1 projects, I mean, this is specifically for the ballot issue.
Correct.
I mean, so the Tier 1 project list kind of still lives, but this is specifically for the ballot.
Correct. And the difference is these 2 projects down here, That's what was on the Tier 1 10-year list. And again, we rebalanced and put more on I-25. It's essentially what we did. And brought forward US 24 East. But I think we may be able to slide some money in there into 24 West.
So when it's under the other options, is that still on your list, or is that just for us to consider to move up?
It is to consider to move up. If I can reduce some cost estimate on this project, we may be able to put some money back into 24 West, I-25 to Woodland Park, and fund it as a top or Tier 1 priority. It may go to maybe only 10 million. But maybe we can come back to the board and kind of explain how we're going to fund those priorities on 24 West in a different fashion.
So is the 115 Rock Creek South, is that even in our MPO boundary?
It's on the verge, so it's close. Yeah, I think it is in PPACG. It's right on the border, so.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember if I think it is, yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion for discussion purposes.
Sure.
I would move that we approve the list as presented by CDOT for consideration for House Bill 17-1242, with the condition that if CDOT is able to readjust any of those numbers on the top list, that the US 24 corridor, however you want to define that, but the US 24 corridor
West.
West, thank you, is prioritized first above the Constitution Carefree, and if you can readjust that whatever portion of monies goes on the
Okay.
actual list.
Okay.
A second.
Second.
Can I make an amendment to that?
It's up for
The second.
discussion.
It is up
It's up for discussion.
All right, so I'd like to bring a point of discussion. Could we just create another line item called State Highway 24 West and then just include it under there and put it after State Highway 21? Have its own item.
It would.
Okay,
Yes,
is that
it
how you
would.
would do that?
It'd end
Okay.
up
It
with
would.
its own item.
It would be its own corridor, correct.
I think Jennifer had said something about above the Constitution Carefree, and it's like, no, it has to go way up there.
Well, it's only going to be included if
Right,
there
if
can
they
be
free up
savings from
funds.
the Rock Creek project,
Right,
right?
all right.
Or
Yeah.
other projects.
Right.
I know
Yeah.
you're still putting together those estimates, so.
The first option.
At which point it will no longer be under other options, but it will be up with one of those lists.
It'll be correct.
Probably
And we
under-
may be able to,
Up to 277.
Probably under other somewhere.
Well, it'd be nice if it had its own light item, right? State
Oh,
Highway
it
20.
will. It'll look like the $40 million US 24 Garrett Road to Stapleton. It'll
Yep.
look just like that, just it'll be the fourth bullet.
Well, and I'm saying, I don't even want a fourth bullet. I want it
She-
as State Highway 24 and then a bullet west.
either way, it will have it. We can do that.
Okay.
We can have a standout corridor.
Yep.
I think my motion accomplishes what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Well, thank you. That was, this is good. We've been wanting to do this for a while, so
Thank you, Mark.
I know it was painful.
Before Mark leaves, is it possible to get a revised list of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects?
When we finish it, yes, we will get, in terms of all the Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects, yeah, we will give that to the TAC.
Well, I guess that was my question. I mean, this was really for the House bill, and I guess that's a question as CDOT moves forward, depending on what happens with this bill in the next 3 weeks. The CDOT Tier 1 and Tier 2 may not change. This is specifically for the bill, correct?
Correct. But when we revise the overall list, and we have revised it, this is the draft list.
Okay.
And it's in a spreadsheet. I can show you the spreadsheet now. It's all these projects are on this list. When we revise it, we'll send it out. we finish revising it.
Mark?
But I don't anticipate any of the numbers going down. We may actually, we'll see if that increases, but I don't think the 277 is going to increase, but it won't go down.
Mark, do you have any objection if I send your PowerPoint out to the TAC members?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all. Okay. Thank you.
So we're busy taking notes.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Okay, we're almost there. Item 8A, Colorado Legislative Session Update for 2017. Bethany.
Hello. Bethany Schomer, PPACG. Jessica has asked me to cover her item, so I will be brief. So all of the bills listed in your memo were ratified at the board meeting. The biggest one I want to talk about is 1242. So it is scheduled for finance next Tuesday, and it is likely to die. So there's not really much to say. Senator Grantham called a meeting this morning with reporters, and he's not optimistic that it will pass. There are 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats in the Finance Committee, so the 3 Republicans are likely to kill the bill. But PPACG has taken a monitor stance on this, so there's not really much we can do in terms of advocating for or against it.
You should have had your item before this discussion.
Yeah. Well, we had a good discussion, Brian.
Sure
Good
did.
discussion. So, yeah, this is the only transportation really hope this session, so I mean, they might convene a special session, but as of right now, they're not expecting it to go forward. Yeah. Do you guys have any other questions? That's what Brian said.
No. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Item 9A, TIP Policy Task Force Update. Kevin?
Afternoon, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner with PPACG. This morning we had our TIP Policy Task Force meeting. This is our 3rd meeting to try and discuss alternative policies to, replace the not one penny extra policy, but now we have opened it up to additional policies as well that might help us along the way. I think about half of you in this room were at that meeting, and I think it went very well. Last month, we created a list of potential alternative policies to consider. We got to 17 policies total, and today we basically went through each policy and basically highlighted it in red, green, or yellow. Red if it's something that we do not want to consider, green if it's something that we really want to consider, and yellow if it's something that we're not too sure about. So we're really able to start reducing the amount of policies and kind of narrow it down to have a more in-depth discussion for next month. And I think today we made a lot of progress on it. I'm hoping next month we'll probably have it narrowed down to a couple policies, and I think a lot of these policies we'll probably end up combining together. There's several that can work with each other. And so if not next month, I would definitely say in June we will have probably a policy to take to the committees and to the board. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to the meeting today, but I think it went very well.
Yeah, thanks again for your support. It was a good meeting. It's moving along pretty well, and I think we thought, at least I thought, maybe we'd be there, at this point, and we could have the board address it in May, but I think it's worth taking a couple extra months and getting it right.
Yeah, I would say a lot of progress today, and thank you for all the efforts and everybody actually coming together, working together was nice. But I'm wondering, when is the next call for projects, and how? Because we want to do this before the next call, and is this holding up the next call, or how? I can't imagine it does because
after the plan, right? After the new plan is adopted
for the TIP.
The new long-range plan?
No, sorry. You're saying the call for the next
for the TIP, yes.
Yeah, the next call for projects will be in the next several months. We haven't determined that yet. We're still waiting for CDOT to give us the resource allocation. And I think I was talking with Wendy today about when they will have that, and it sounds like they're not going to have it for at least another month. So we might have to do a call for projects before that, which makes things a little more difficult for us because we don't know exactly how much funding we're working with. But with that being said, I think we can internally, staff, we can create a solid process to get through that, because starting in next month, I'm going to be coming to the TAC, and probably just to the TAC at this point, to start the process of call for projects.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, item 10, any member entity announcements to share? Jen.
I would just like to mention, I don't know if you saw the many press releases yesterday, but El Paso County, together with the City of Colorado Springs and Douglas County and many other entities, has formed the I-25 Gap Coalition. And the purpose of that is to look at possible funding sources for the I-25 gap improvements. And I guess we'll see this month what happens with the legislative session. And if that's not successful, we will continue to be working on that. And so they have a website, and I can send some additional information out, but we're excited to work towards that, depending on what happens with House Bill 17-1242.
Not to cut the line, but as a follow-up to what you just said, Jennifer, we've already had some next steps from that meeting that was held yesterday that request what money is available in the RTA for the I-25 gap and what money is available in the TIP for I-25.
From the RTA? From the RTA?
Yes.
So the purpose of the coalition is to look at all different funding sources, and we have to look at every single one of them. And so that has been some that has been brought up by elected officials. So I'm certain that as this moves along, the announcement yesterday was simply just to show that we've formed the gap. There's essentially the coalition itself. There's essentially elected officials on there from, and I'm part of that as well, but elected officials on there from many of the entities and a lot of stakeholders, and we'll be adding some more. And part of that is to look at all different sources of funding and finance. So I don't think that there's one end-all, be-all, and that was part of the discussion, is that it's usually probably not one source of funding. So it will be interesting as it goes forward.
And there is some money in the TIP now that is not programmed, STP Metro funds. And of course, as we start the new TIP, we are going to add 2 new years of funding that right now don't have any projects assigned to them.
Any other announcements? All right, items for future TAC meetings.
I'm going to be bringing forward the 2018-2019 UPWP next month, and so I will send out an email to everybody and ask and remind you, but please start thinking of your transportation planning activities that you're doing with local funds that can be included in the UPWP. I'm sure there'll be a TIP amendment. Kevin's already mentioned the new TIP item that he'll be bringing forward, and objectives and targets, the next step in the long-range goal development process.
So Ken, are you planning on, between now and the next TAC meeting, you're going to ask us for upcoming projects for the UPWP, or?
I will send you out an email, yes, asking for it. We have to have the UPWP approved no later than June, so that CDOT can start its IGA process, so that come October 1, our funds are available.
All right. So this will be a
In the past, we didn't do it until later, and the IGA was never approved until December. So we were unable to touch federal funds, our planning dollars, my salary, this is why we're pushing this. We weren't able to touch the funds until the IGA was approved, which was 3 months after the start of the federal fiscal year. So starting this year round statewide, CDOT is starting the process 3 months earlier so that come 1 October, all the MPOs can have their planning funds.
Okay, all right. So we'll have to make a recommendation in May? So the
I'm
board
hoping,
can
yes.
approve
Mhm.
June, okay, all right.
Yeah, so that's right. It would be May next month for your recommendation to the board for approval in June.
Okay. All right. All right, anything else? No, thank you all. Great. Oh, Jen.
I think we just need to continue to, I mean, I know we just talked about priority projects for the House bill and the CDOT Tier 1, Tier 2. I think, I'll say it again, because we talked about it last month and the month before, but I think we need to have a top 5 or 6 bulleted list like we did previously in regards to our priority projects here in this region. So I would suggest that that ends up on the agenda again next month for discussion now that you have your city council, or the city council has been determined.
Good point. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, have a good evening. Thank you.
No, you don't have to for adjournment, you can just do it.
Before everybody goes, I have one more.
Who made the motion, right, for the priority projects?
Yes.
And Randy did the second.
Randy seconded.
Tuesday and Thursday.